capitalization right now.
Yeah.
I'm fixing it.
I'm a very much, I like low, what are they called? Not minor. What is it?
Lowercase letters?
My mind like completely went blank there.
Welcome to this discussion about literature where
Oh my
the
God,
professor doesn't
yeah.
know what a lowercase letter is.
The professor has a degree in English, the language that we all speak. And I can't spell. You don't speak it? Was that what you were going to say?
I don't speak it very well.
Same. It's fine. So welcome to the discussion of Borne by Jeff Vandermeer, which we read in July. I read in August. And that's why we're late. So I hope everybody came with their thoughts and feelings and remember everything. Who wants to give a summary of this book? Bobby, I feel like you've done it too much. It's
All
just
right.
That's why I didn't raise my hand. I kept my hand down.
turn.
I'm trying to not be the teacher's pet, so I didn't raise my hand. Okay.
It's okay. I see you and you're valid.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Born takes place in some sort of future world where a calamity or multiple calamities has struck the entire planet. And it's basically a post-apocalyptic world. In the first few pages of this book, we get introduced to a giant 2-story tall flying bear, 3-story tall flying bear.
His name is Mord. Put some respect on it, okay?
Mord. And we follow a scavenger. And it is basically a first-person book where it is her accounting of her survival, and she finds this creature on the side of Mord, called what she begins to call Borne, and it is the growth of this creature that has her maternal instincts come out, and it's about how these people survive in this world with this plant-like thing and these giant bears. It's a weird book.
That's what it says on the back cover when you read. When you're like, let me read the summary of this book.
If you picked up a book and it said that and it was like, look, this is a weird book.
I would 100% read it. I would 100%.
I would read it too.
I would 100% read it. And that's basically what this book is. I bought this book sight unseen, obviously, when we were doing it for the book club. I didn't even read the back cover. I just knew that it was Jeff Vandermeer, and I had read Annihilation, and I have thoughts about Annihilation, but I enjoyed the experience overall.
Were your thoughts that Annihilation is perfect?
Far from it, but it's good. It was interesting. I read all 3 of the books, and I thought they were interesting. Not my favorite books, not the worst books I've ever read. So just kind of come and go.
I know that's not how Kelsey feels about them because I watched her video. She talked about reading Borne.
So I started reading this book, and in the first 5 pages, it was like, well, this is going to be an experience. And let me tell you, dear listener, it was a fucking experience. And so that is the synopsis for Borne. I don't think I'm leaving anything out.
No, you're not. I honestly, the actual synopsis is just more words than what you said. But it's like pretty much the same.
It breaks it down. All it's missing at the very end is this book is weird.
Yeah, but I feel like Jeff Vandermeer's name itself is like FYI warning alert. This is gonna be a weird book, and you just have to go along with it.
Yeah.
When you said the text, you're like, "Hey, it gets better in the second half." I was crying. I was like, "Oh."
Well, you know what?
Justin.
It takes for me anyway. It took the book.
It does
a bit to get going because you are dropped into a world you know nothing about. You know, post-apocalyptic worlds, you can kind of like, okay, I understand what's happening here. We have a scavenger. We're trying to survive. We're fighting other people. Are those beetles in their eyes? Like, what's happening here? Why is that bear flying?
Yeah.
So,
I think Mord was the hardest thing for me to... Like, I understand his symbolism and all of that, and we'll get into like the literary devices.
Mhm.
But I think Mord was like the heart. Like I was like, how would like that even happen?
Well, I think oddly he probably knows that, which it's why it's literally like the first thing he brings up at the first two sentences of the book is about this giant flying bear. So it both throws you completely off guard and also gives you the entire length of the book to kind of like
Yeah.
get used to it, I guess. I think what I both appreciate and where some of my criticism comes from with the book is how much he doesn't seem to care whether or not you know or should feel comfortable about knowing what's actually going on. Because I feel like every time you start to get a handle on like, okay, I'm starting to learn the rules of this world, there's like a new thing that he throws in that Rachel, our protagonist, is just sort of like, and these because it's in first person. There's no editorializing by an omniscient narrator. It's just like, and these were the mutant children who have different animal limbs and weird eyes who assault me, and they come from this place, and talks about it like, of course you should know this because I know this. You know, you're reading my diary or whatever. Because at one point she does address you directly. You're reading my diary or whatever it is, you should also know what these things are because you exist in this world, which I both really liked and also sometimes was the part that was the hardest hump to get over for me, I think.
I think there's multiple things going on here with Jeff Vandermeer. Firstly, we learn later on there's a reason why Rachel doesn't address how this world started. She's just like, welcome to my day. And you're like, okay, I guess. Cool. And the other thing is that a lot of like reviewers online, because I was looking up a lot of reviews of like the confusion. I wanted to know if this was like appealing to like the masses, or is this very much like a Vandermeer book for people who already know it's weird and they're like, we're here for the ride. And I think it's interesting what Vandermeer's doing here is that he's kind of writing a book about the people that are involved in these post-apocalyptic stories that we hear. So like when we're watching a movie and the post-apocalyptic stuff is happening and all of this is happening, there are people that are just like, okay, well, we're gonna live now, I guess. And I think it's interesting because Borne and Mord work as these Godzilla like characters, and the magician and Mord work as these like two altering fantasies of the world, and they're the factions that are fighting. And like Rachel's just like, I just want to eat something besides an alcohol minnow, she's like, I just maybe not want to be drunk one day.
But that's the thing, like the last 35-40 seconds that you just went off on a tangent, my mind just went to fucking mush listening to you describe all this.
You should first of all be paying attention and not something that you should tell your teacher.
No, I am paying attention, but what you're saying is just basically word vomit. It's like, it makes no sense. If you have not read this book, it doesn't matter that we're explaining it. You're just like, what?
Yeah.
And that's the gist of this book, is just you being like, what?
Yeah. What, like, before we go further into this discussion, I'm curious what you rated it, Justin and Bobby. Justin, you could go first because I feel like you'll have the differing.
2 out of 5.
Wow, that low. Justin and I talked a little bit about the book beforehand, but I didn't think it was going to be 2 out of 5.
This is like me with Light of the Jedi. I was like,
I gave Light of the Jedi 3. I gave it like an average score.
That's fine. Bobby, go.
I get
the correct response.
4 I give 4 out of 5 stars. The dock and the stars is the kind of stuff that I mentioned briefly. I'm sure we'll get into more of it, but a lot and also that's just like personal preference. Like first person narrative books are very, very hit and miss for me, for exactly some of the reasons we'll talk about as we get farther into the discussion.
Yeah, I also gave it 4 stars. I think something that I agree with you, Justin, is that definitely in the beginning, the weirdness does throw you off. So it took me quite a bit of time to like get into the book, and especially like while I was annotating it, I was looking for the symbolism in the weird. And I think that made me analyze everything. But when there's so much weirdness, you're kind of like analyzing, sometimes we could argue about this, useless stuff, right? Because we're basically at the end of the day following an average person in their day, that something a little bit phenomenal happens to them. But in reality, is it the weirdest thing that happens to Rachel? I have to sneeze. Hold on.
The silence of it was like almost more deafening than the actual scene.
Myself.
I know, but the sheer, it just went so silent when you did it. It was like the moment in Oppenheimer before you hear the explosion.
Oh my god.
We should review Oppenheimer. Such a great movie.
Okay, well, we're here for Born.
We're here.
You really are the problem child.
You are.
So, what I feel like there's so many things we could talk about first. I think the most obvious theme is parenthood in the book.
Yes.
Yes.
So basically, as Justin explained, Rachel, so Mord, the supernatural,
The Big
like,
Daddy.
bear, yeah, the Big Daddy. And I definitely want to get into religious themes, and we can in this section if you want, but this is definitely religious leaning. So Mord works as like God, right? And when he's asleep or when he travels, things fall from him, and Rachel as a scavenger is following him so that she can collect whatever falls from his fur. And one day when Mord is sleeping, she sees this like plant like thing, and she's like, all right, I'll bring it home because like my BF's a scientist, I guess, maybe, and like I'm just a rowdy scavenger. So she brings Born home, and while it is growing, it eventually adopts a sentience. Thanks to, or not thanks to, Rachel, nature versus nurture is definitely a big commentary in this as well. So do you guys want to open up the discussion about parenthood, as you guys are the daddies? I don't even own an animal. So
yeah, it's kind of it's a very interesting, I mean, it's definitely not a subtle like parenthood metaphor, because she's talking about it almost explicitly
daily.
about how Born is a metaphor for her having a child, basically. But I thought it was, you know, what I thought it got right on this sort of more elevated, you know, out there kind of situation is that she loves this thing, right? And she's terrified it's gonna get hurt, and she's terrified she's going to bring it up the wrong way, right? Because she's terrified that this thing has the potential to be very dangerous, even though she won't admit it to herself sometimes. She knows it will be dangerous, so she's trying to give it morality and human morality and things like that, and terrified that it could do something really bad if it didn't pick that stuff up in the correct way. And then also the feeling of just as it's growing and wants to leave and wants to be its own being, she has trouble letting go, and she also is, you know, kind of mortified at what it wants to become. And I think it's a good metaphor for children. I think it's especially a good metaphor for raising a little white boy, you know, like because I think, you know, obviously it's when my son is 5 and now he's the sweetest little thing in the entire world, but you know, if any kind of person was going to be the kind of person that would do harm to people, it would be a person that looks like him, right? So in sort of a major societal way, so it definitely has, like, there's like a burden to it, and I think this sort of brought up those feelings and those parallels in my mind quite a bit while reading it.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because like that would literally, the worst thing that I could even think of if I were to have a son is like to have an asshole. Like I cannot have a misogynistic pig in my house. Like I would literally, I would die. And I think it's really interesting that like Rachel's kind of taking on this like ignoring the problem that sometimes happens when it's like, oh, it's my child, so like I don't want to accept what they're doing. And I think the first instance that we really see that is after Bourne protects Rachel or gets revenge for Rachel, and all of a sudden he has eyes, right? And Rachel's like, okay, these eyes look very familiar, but it's very easy to cast off, right? She's like, oh, he's growing every day. Like, who am I to know what happens, right? And Wick, as we know later on in the book, kind of has more knowledge. And this is why he's warning Rachel about the potential danger that Bourne has and what he's capable of. And Rachel's kind of like having to deny accepting that because she's put so much effort into like teaching Bourne to be a good thing. And at this point, it already has a sentience. And Rachel, like, it's so, the theme of mother and child is so like ingrained in this book. Like Rachel says, like, he was not born, but I born him. And that's how she gives him his name and gives him like a gender, like puts a gender on him. Like she feels so attached to this, and it makes sense. And that's why even, like, I know you guys haven't gone through this yet, but like as kids ourselves, we were once children, that Rachel is so hurt when Bourne wants to move out. Right. And I was like, oh my God, that's my mom. Like, that's crazy. And like, I like felt for Rachel in a sense, because I'm like understanding that want of Bourne to be alone, because I'm putting myself in Bourne's shoes. But then when you look at it from a, no, he's actually like a dangerous being perspective, you're like, oh no, he's like a little snake and like did this to go like have his own adventures. But obviously his nature is coming in more and he needs a space to be natural because it is opposite to his nurture.
Right. It's like the hit television program Dexter.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I kept thinking.
He's like, what if I just kill bad guys?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was like.
Yes.
I saw them. They were doing a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm a robot squid flower, and I only kill bad guys.
I only kill killers.
Or people who were almost dying. He's like one of the,
Yeah.
He was practically dead.
He was really old, Mom.
Yeah. And that theme of like nature versus nurture versus mother versus child is definitely has that religious sense that I mentioned as well. And I think it's really interesting because Mord kind of works as like God, and God kind of imposes a child onto Rachel, who acts as Mary, and Bourne as Jesus, right? But I think...
But at the end of the Bible, Jesus is not turned into a giant butterfly monster that tries to kill God.
No, but he like sacrifices for our sins.
He does, but but doesn't do so trying to kill God.
We only have 12 perspectives of that moment, so
maybe he did turn into a giant monster.
Like, who knows what
There's
like
a lost part of the Bible. Where
who knows what Mary Magdalene said.
True.
Religion is actually awesome. I was wrong.
Jesus was sick. It was wild.
Sick moves, bro.
But anyways, to get back to Bourne, I think it was interesting to just watch his life, and we're kind of, because we're in Rachel's perspective, the parents of Bourne. So when Bourne throws tantrums, we're like, oh, he's just throwing a tantrum. When he wants to move out, we're like, oh my God, our little baby's growing up. When really, he's a monster.
Right. I mean, the thing is, like, though he's not, and this again gets into another discussion, right? It's like, do you blame, it's what they talk about with Mord, right? Like, can you really blame a bear for just doing what a bear does? Just because he's 3 stories tall, and can fly, he just is in his nature doing what he is built and made to do. And that's what Bourne is doing. Like, Bourne is just doing what it was made to do, right? Like this is what it was built to do, what it's programmed to do. For whatever reason, these scientists made this thing that could do this. They did, and he does do monstrous things, right? And he does horrible things in our idea of morality and society and what, how human beings are supposed to treat each other, right? But in many ways, I think the book is also trying to say, like, you can't put your set of ideas and values and whatever on this thing that is completely foreign and different from what you are, right? She's trying to make Borne into her baby. Borne is not her baby, and I think, what I think is interesting about Wick as a character, right, is that they do a very good job. Vandermeer does a very good job of making Wick wrong about enough things where him saying, even though he, even admittedly from Rachel, is the person who would know more than anybody else and probably living in the world still, as well as their brain, that this thing is dangerous, right? He does so many other things wrong. And he seems so unstable in so many other ways that you as a reader, because you don't want to believe him, you get kind of a permission in your brain not to believe him, even though from the very moment that he knew it was going to happen, from the very moment it started. Yeah. So,
and I think you're also negatively looking. I think Wick and Rachel are very interesting because they end up having a similar way of thinking, kind of, because Wick is not addicted in a sense, but like needs to have his medication, his drugs, which we find out later. But personally, in the beginning, I found him to come off as an addict, right? It's not fully explained why he needs the drugs that he needs, why he builds the drugs that he needs, and why he is the way he is, and he comes off jealous. And I think it's meant to be that way for that Rachel can stay in this denial that this child that she has now isn't dangerous. And I think Wick as an addict, like, still what we believe, taking things that he doesn't need to and denying that, like, he could live without it. And I think we're meant to believe that because he sends Rachel off to sell drugs and stuff like that. And I think we're meant to believe this of Wick to put it as a dynamic with Rachel, because it's kind of like, well, you have your thing and I don't say anything about it, so I'm going to do my thing now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And the grand metaphor of the thing too, he's also like the dad who didn't want the kid, right? And so he's kind of like, you replaced me with this kid, basically. We used to be me and you, and now you kind of let this interloper in here along with us, and it's gonna ruin everything.
I said, like, R.I.P. Freud, you would have loved this book.
For sure.
Because he's definitely acting like a jealous father. And I think it's really interesting because we find out later on, but there are moments that Borne was pretending to be Wick. And so this conflict that the characters are having in the beginning, I'm curious, if I were to reread the book, would I notice when Wick isn't actually Wick and he's Borne? So I'm very, like, I think I love a book that, like, when you find out things later on, you want to start from the beginning again and kind of examine, like, oh, it was all here, but we didn't notice.
There's a twist in the book, or the book leads you to believe that there's a bigger twist coming than one actually hits, and it's when the magician is talking to Rachel for the first time, and I was 99.9% positive that Rachel was a clone of the magician, because she seemed to know a lot about her, and the way that she looked like her in a certain way, I was thinking, like, okay, Rachel's definitely a clone, and Wick knows it, and he's keeping her at arm's length, or keeping the truth away from her. And then you come to find out, like, no, it's actually much more simple than that.
I mean, the twist of where Rachel came from is still, like, pretty, like, crazy. She comes from another, like, dimension. What are you talking about?
That's why Rachel has
a book with a flying bear that's 3 stories tall. Nothing is overly shocking.
The twist is that this isn't a post-apocalyptic world.
Yeah, that's the whole twist of the whole thing.
The twist that we're spoiling now, 30 minutes into the live show, is that it's not actually post-apocalyptic. It's just another world.
Yeah.
That's why she doesn't understand the company. That's why she doesn't understand what happened. That's why she doesn't understand why one day she was on a little beach playing soccer, and then the next day she's not there anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Like this company like breached like this sort of like into this other world and sort of like filtered in, and a lot of what is happening like is because of what you found out that they basically escaping the apocalypse that was coming on Rachel's world. They created a new one basically in this other world essentially. And she was kind of like ferried over there in a box basically as like a test subject.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And she wasn't supposed to live, basically.
Yeah, and we found out that Wick is also not a human being.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens.
And Mord is a person.
And Mord was a person.
There were so many things that happened.
Justin's like, yeah, but she wasn't a clone of this one character, so nothing weird happened.
But the thing is, like, there's so much weird shit in the book that when you
Yeah.
throw more weird shit at me, like, it doesn't really register.
But I
like
think
whether or not she was a clone or not, or whatever the twist was supposed to be, it just like you could see something coming from a mile away. Whatever the end result is, it's like, okay, there it is. Like, there's the end result.
I would argue that I think he was leading you to believe that, because I think that a lot of things are unclear. Again, Rachel is just a character in the grand scheme of this war that she believes is happening that isn't actually happening because it's not an apocalyptic universe, right? Like the magician is doing this because she has all this knowledge and she knows everything. But I think you're supposed to believe that, oh, there's something more nefarious going on, when the actual twist is that Borne can copy them. And I think that's the cloning concept that is the twist. And I think the magician is meant to throw you off, because I don't actually think like all the fights. That's why like when Borne goes off to fight with Mord, we know nothing about it. Wick and Rachel, they're crawling through the walls. Okay. When the magician and Mord are fighting, Rachel's like, oh yeah, like she shot a cannon. Right. But in an action movie or in a fantasy book where you're following the character that is the opposition to the evil, you would get all these details. And I think Rachel's just like, I have to get food.
Yeah.
Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, Wicked's dying. We need to get into the center of this building. Who cares what Borne is doing?
Yeah. I'm gonna give a hot take. I would not like to live in this world that they live in. It seems
you don't want Beatles
terrible. It seems so terrible.
Really bad, yeah.
But what if you just opened your door one day and there were bears?
It's my favorite
living
moments
room.
of the whole book.
That's the best moment of the whole book.
It's like all these fireflies fell from the sky. Oh, somebody might be breaking it. And in my brain, I picture them like slowly opening the door to try to peek out to see if they see somebody. And there's just like 15 poisonous bears in their lobby or whatever. That part was crazy.
Yeah. I didn't expect that at all, I have to say. Like, I was very much in they're just gonna stay on balcony heights.
Yeah.
Like, live their life.
Well, because the book is very good, right, about, like, Justin, even what you're saying, you know, even though you weren't, like, a fan of it, they do a bunch of things where they sort of, he intentionally undercuts your expectation of what you think is going to happen. So it's like, something great's going to happen. Nope, actually, it's terrible. Actually, Borne kills everything that it comes in contact with, and it's a horrible monster that needs to leave, right?
But I'm going to cut you off for a second.
Yeah.
They give you that information literally right away. Literally right away when he kills all the attackers. You're like, oh, okay, he's a killer. Like,
yeah, but he killed people who were. But the thing is, like, the book. I think the book is intentionally trying to make you question whether or not that's something that, because you don't know anything about him in that moment. He hasn't even spoken.
And I also don't think you're meant to. It's not confirmed that he did that.
Yeah, you don't see him ever do it.
You don't see him do it, but unless he was really going to pull the rug out from beneath you, yeah, Borne killed all those guys.
Right, but we've already.
They were children.
Yeah, they're crazy.
They were bad children.
They were bad. They were very bad. They tried to. They like. You know, they almost killed our protagonist.
So during that entire scene where she's being tortured, I'm like, are they going the full bore here? Like, is this a rape scene? And then it took like 5 pages where you're like, I don't know if this is actually happening, for her to be like, they didn't rape me.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
super weird. Like it was like a very uncomfortable 5 pages.
Yeah, but I think they're meant. It's meant. Okay, I think it's working here to make you as a reader feel conflicted because you believe that Bourne should have killed them, right? But then you're not sure, like, oh, how far. There's always going to be this like conflict within you, and then at the end of the day, Rachel herself doesn't feel like Bourne should have killed, and Wick doesn't feel like Bourne should have killed. Right? At the end of the day, they themselves feel like that's more evil because this is a being that they've raised as a child, right? It's not something that like grew up in this world, has to survive, has to like do the things that they need to do. Born is this pure blank slate as of this point, right? And therefore accepting that he did these things, no matter how warranted, no matter how deserved, is accepting that despite what they've done, the nature of this thing will live on and thus putting them in danger.
Right, but it's also a thing where like what I think that moment is also cloudy because in my mind reading the book, it's like, well, okay, let's say Bourne did kill them, right? It's only scary, right, to Wick and to Rachel in a different way. It's scary to Wick and to Rachel in different ways, right? It'd be scary for Rachel because it's like her child losing its innocence, but for Wick, it's proof that this thing is dangerous and we should get rid of it because it can do this. But if Wick or Rachel had caught those kids doing what they were doing, or even caught them in their base, they would have killed them as well. Yeah. You know, and we see both of them do morally questionable things even before this moment, right? Which are framed as, you know, we're just trying to do what we're doing. We're not going out of our way to be cruel. We're just trying to do whatever we need to do to survive, right? And I think the book does a good job striding that line most of the time with Rachel, especially where she does do stuff that if she did it, obviously in our world now, she would be thrown in jail, but she does it because she would die otherwise. And so I definitely, well, Bourne did what he had to do in that moment. The part that makes it shady is that he lies about it, right? That he won't admit what he did.
Well, that's introducing a new thing that he's learned.
Yeah.
Is to lie.
Yeah.
And he only knows how to lie by mimicking what he sees, right? And that's a scary thing too, because it's not that lying is worse than murder, but like there's an intentional reason to not tell his mom that he did something bad.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And she wants to believe that, again, still that he's this blank slate. So she wants to believe, okay, he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
And sorry.
No. Go ahead. No.
I don't even know what I was gonna say.
It's also interesting because once you know, right, where she comes from at the end, it also informs this, right? Because she actually knows a world that was normal, right? She had parents, she had friends, she had a life, right? Even though it was stressful, she talks very wistfully about her childhood and what it was like, right? And so unlike Wick, who we find out later, he knows exactly what's going on because he was born of this world, right? He's kind of the same thing as Bourne, right? He's a different form of it. He looks like a person, but he's the same form of it, right? And I think that makes it even more interesting when you go back and think about those early parts of the book once you know all the information, from the end.
Yeah, especially like Bourne, even like when he's reading his books and he's doing this and that, and he's like, "Are you sure, Rachel? Are you sure this happened? Are you sure that the world was like this?" And she's like, "This little fuck, like."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay."
That's how you answer children when they ask you questions.
Exactly. That's why.
Little fuck.
Now, don't question me.
Yeah, and it's like when it's true. Like how would Bourne was like, I don't know. He's like, my mom's going crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, this is in my literature.
I've absorbed a lot of people's brains, and none of them have these memories. Okay. Yeah. And that guy was one guy was really old, and he didn't have these memories. Yeah.
Something else I wanted to. I just saw the funniest note I put in this book. Anyways, is when Mord falls down, and the song from Joan of Arcadia where it's like, "What if God was one of us?" Because like God was God no longer. God would have to walk the earth like the rest of us. Anyway, sorry. I was gonna ask another question What do you think Borne is?
Justin, what do you think Borne is?
I just pictured him as Mike Wazowski most of the time.
I meant more philosophical.
Yeah, I know that philosophical, but I just wanted to get that out there. I always pictured him as Mike Wazowski. I don't know why.
We can put that up there with Anne Hathaway as Clara from Clara and the Sun casting choices.
I still think that's worse.
Okay, listen. I didn't think that it was a small me.
Just a normal sized person that drowns in mud in a cornfield. Sorry, Justin, what do you think Borne is?
Like what physically he is? Explain your question, Kelsey.
Is he human or is he dancer? Like,
you're gonna have to do better than that. Like he's some sort
like,
of
what
symbiote.
Yeah.
So he's like in my mind he's like a symbiote. Like he feeds on hosts, and so it's a little bit different than I would say like
almost
out
like
of
a child.
Like a that's not exactly what children.
They sap all our life out, Justin, and they take our place.
Yes,
and then they take our place.
Actually, I'm wrong. It's exactly
it's exactly like it. Justin's like I amend my 5 stars.
I amend my statement. Actually, this book is the best book of all time. Yeah, but like that's the thing is like it's this thing that he learns, he grows, or it grows, you know, and it absorbs the consciousness. It's like a basic sci-fi trope. It absorbs the consciousness and the learnings of everything that it eats. And so it's constantly hungry and constantly wants to eat. We've seen this 1,000 times in sci-fi movies and literature and comic books and so on and so forth.
Doesn't so angry.
I know.
There's something about this book that just is like that makes
I just
me
wanted to show you
mad.
guys what Borne looks like. Apparently,
That's sort of what I pictured. Sort of. It was a little bit sleeker than that in my brain, but that is actually kind of exactly what I pictured.
Yeah.
That one at the end, yeah, with the bear fighting the giant squid monster.
Even this one of him trying to be like a human at first.
Yeah.
I think they were. Oh my god, Mord.
More just laying on top of.
Yeah. There's these ones that I think are like kind of what I was picturing. Like the more eyes he had, the more I was like, you know, when like the children go through their not cute phase, and you're like, I guess we're
You
here.
keep talking about children, Kelsey. Like, you know, when kids, you obviously you guys know when kid, like you have one.
You know when your kids are ugly as shit, and they want to kill you. Well, this is what I'm thinking.
I'm projecting from my childhood.
No, obviously, when I thought about Borne, like for some reason, I had this idea of when he was like just walking around. I always just saw Mike Wazowski, but realistically, you see the front cover of the book, and you're trying to picture that, right? You're trying to picture a vase with 1,000 eyeballs on it.
Yeah,
and it just like, like none of that like did anything for me. So I was like, I'm just gonna picture this thing walking around with a giant eye, and it did wonders for me. Let me tell you.
You know, in my brain, can I just say what I pictured, and I'm gonna see if I can share with you guys, because what I share screen, yes, share screen. This is what I want to show you guys. There we go. The portal turret is what I pictured, like the closed version here. Like I pictured, and then I pictured like the tentacles like kind of like growing out of it and stuff like that, and it changing shape, obviously. But for some reason, I had like this sleek sort of like thought in my head for most of it, until it started talking about it becoming like that, like, you know, covering the entire ceiling or what have you. Because they do kind of, you know, put it out there that it's biomechanical in some way. So my brain, I guess the mechanical sort of overrid the bio part for me.
I just like thinking about Portal.
I do love thinking about Portal, but it was a thing that was made and created or whatever. That they strongly like infer that for sure.
Well, Borne is definitely like any topic that we're gonna bring up about Borne. We could mention about AI as well, right? There, but I think Borne is meant to be this more like eco horror type of thing, like the horrors that can come from natural stuff that happens in the world. But I'm more curious if you guys feel like Borne is a good example of a person or is he a weapon, or is he something else?
He's exactly what he's like. It's kind of what Bobby mentioned before. Like, you don't get mad at the bear for doing bear things. Like, he's not a person. He has a higher level of understanding than like a normal animal, but he has these instincts that like.
But he's sentient.
Yes,
a bear
he's sentient.
isn't.
You're correct. But in the same
like
way,
sentient in human standards, I understand that bears
they
have
are
souls
sentient.
and
They
personalities.
they are sentient creatures.
Yeah,
but yes, I
I
understand.
meant, like,
yeah.
Humanoid.
Yeah.
I think he can't help like what his true nature is. There's no like nature over nurture thing where it's like we could make
But it
you
is
not a
nature
killer.
versus nurture.
But like there was no coming around there where you could be like, you know, like if somebody had gotten a hold of, taking Bobby's example from earlier, of Dexter, and it was just like, you need therapy. We're gonna fix you before you start killing a bunch of people. There was no coming back from what Borne is. Like, it's like what it needs to survive, it seems like. That's like everything they throw at you is basically like he has this hunger that he has to satiate.
Yeah.
Or else.
But he does have, right, like a he has regret about it. He has thought about it. He tries to not do it. You know, he can't help himself, but there is another layer on top of it, which is what I'm talking about this kind of idea of trying to impose, like, I think the book is explicitly trying to say this. He's not a person. He's not a human, but he is a person, right? He's not a human being. So he doesn't have our same instincts. He doesn't have our same morality system, whatever you want to call it. But he is a person. He has wants and desires, and, you know, he loves things and hates things, and has goals. Like, no, he probably was constructed to be a weapon, right? But he's not a weapon because he can't be aimed like a gun and shot, right? Forced to go somewhere that he doesn't agree to go to. You know, he can be tricked, he can be manipulated because he is a person. And that's the line I highlighted or whatever when I rated it on Goodreads.
I know.
It was the
Influencer.
Yeah, we all just want to be people, and none of us know what that really means. You know, because I think explicitly Vandermeer is being like, well, Wick is also not a human being. He's not a biologically human person, but you wouldn't say he wasn't a person. You know, because everything, he acts like we expect a human person to behave, right? Yeah. Including all his flaws, and so but his flaws just tend to line up with even his bad flaws, which are covering up terrible things that he did when he worked for this company. We understand that as people do that. You know, they're not, and so we take him as a person. So I think the book is trying to especially make that parallel. And sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say I agree, because specifically the first time that Borne like absorbs others people, like, because we know that he's like absorbing little cockroaches and lizards, but like those are okay because humans deem themselves a higher being than other things, and it's okay that little vermins die. But when the torture scene happens, and we don't explicitly know what happened to Rachel, that is the first time that I think Borne is feeling the need to absorb, but he's doing it like he has a morality. And that's something that's like very interesting when I could talk about this for a really long time, but like when we talk about like aliens potentially visiting Earth, like there's no way we can even implicate our own understanding onto aliens, because it's impossible to place things with such varying variables, right? But Borne has been raised with the same morality. He doesn't come from another planet. He comes from the same planet and is raised by someone who understands the world a specific way. So he's vengeful in this action of absorbing them, and then lies because he has the morality and he knows it's wrong, but he did it anyways because he saw what happened to Rachel, and he's like, might as well, because I'm hungry. So there is this morality. He knows it's wrong. That's why he lies. So he does understand morality in a sense that humans do, just like Wick.
Yeah.
But Wick, we're like, oh, but we spent 300 pages thinking Wick's human.
Yeah.
And technically, we don't ever know what he looks like. We only understand Rachel's concept of what human beings
She
look
thinks
like.
he's a fox.
She thinks he's a hottie, and that's why she stays with him
Yeah.
in the balcony cliffs.
In the balcony cliffs, which is some sort of mole tunnel / hotel / fortress.
I was picturing like a mountain hotel like,
Yep. Yeah.
type of vibe.
Yeah, for sure.
But to go back to what I was saying about like aliens and stuff, like there's so many factors that we have to take into consideration as well with Mord and with Wick. Like Rachel is putting on our own. We can assume Rachel's coming from our world. So Rachel's putting our understanding of the world and our versions of morality and this and that onto everything that surrounds her. But if an alien were to come here, like we don't know what chemicals created their world, right? So we're hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. That makes us think in the end through evolution of morality a specific way. But if you were made of nitrogen and uranium, who knows what your brain would understand? And there's no way for us to conceptualize another thing, right? And I think that that's kind of where this nature and nurture verse comes in, because Rachel is coming from another world. So she's kind of like, no, this is what a person is, and this and that. And Wick is being created by people who come from the same world, trying to escape and creating different dimensions. So they all have the same morality, the same goals, the same values. But Borne, Mord, the like all these different things now are throwing in factors, and that's why the book is so weird, because it doesn't make sense to what we understand as physics, as this and that. Like it's impossible for us to conceptualize it. I think Borne is kind of like a smaller example of us trying to inflict what we understand and what we conceptualize the world to be. And he's like, he's breaking free.
Yeah.
He's like, no. I will eat people if I want.
I will eat people I want to. But I think also explicitly the sort of I think Mord also exists as another counterpoint to both Wick and to Borne. It's like a chain, because the reveal that Mord was originally a human being is to show you that just because someone is biologically human does not mean they are a person, right? This beast is not a person, right? It lives only by its instincts, right? And only by this sort of like directive it was given. It is a weapon, right? It has a ingrained sort of programming that is to protect this building.
Well, it doesn't.
Until it doesn't, but it still is like, it still kind of guards it, even though, you know, it breaks that. It breaks the building, right? It doesn't care about the physical building. It's trying to mark this territory, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think also like intentionally, right? Because like you're saying it, and I didn't think of this until you said it, Kelsey, which is that, because I'm thinking
think of Mord being a human. Like I didn't think of your point. I was like, whoa. I didn't even think of that.
Is that, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, he put us in this world that is so different from ours intentionally just to keep us off our off our game and on our heels. But really the real confusing thing is the fact that he seeds in all this stuff that you think you recognize, you know, and then you think, how did we get from this world that seems to be like something that I would recognize, that we don't seem that far away from right now, to this thing, you know?
I think that's on purpose too, because Jeff Vandermeer's like main like horror category is like eco science fiction, and he's very into like, okay, this is the worst possible scenario of the world if we would let like this happen to the environment, or this happened to the environment. And so Rachel's throwing in things where it's like the waters were rising, and she's obviously coming from a very not like country, but I mean like, and not isolated, but not like a big city. She's not a big city girl.
No.
Right? She's coming from very small communities, and they keep having to move and keep moving to safety because, as you understand, like waters are rising, there's political upheaval. She's explaining how like her dad was in politics and then something happened and he wasn't anymore. And a bunch of these things. So all these things were like, yeah, of course a post-apocalyptic world happened. But there's that one thing that we're like, but then how do we have a flying bear? Like,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do we have a flying bear and alcohol minnows?
Yeah.
And now this alien thing.
Yeah.
Like, how there's something that's missing, and the whole time we think, oh, Rachel lost her memory. Rachel doesn't understand what happened. Oh, she's just a minor character in a big girl world.
Yeah.
When in reality, she's not even from here. That's why it doesn't make sense, and that's why our understanding of apocalypse can't even like comprehend. We can't even understand this.
Yeah, and he's also seeding doubt, right? Because there are these memory beetle things that people take to like to kind of forget about, to have a better past that they can remember, so they're not just thinking about this terrible world they live in. So part of you is like, well, maybe she says she never got them, but she also says that people don't remember that they get them. So it's like she could have just had her whole backstory invented, and when Bourne's questioning it, you're also thinking, well, okay, maybe she doesn't remember. This isn't real. Maybe this is all a fiction that got put into her head. And the fact that
she isn't real.
She isn't real.
I was gonna say
like she's a robot or something.
not like a robot, really, but like just maybe she is. Maybe we're thinking of her as like a human, a person,
right?
But maybe she's not even. She's
right. Yeah,
a different world. Like we don't even know. Like maybe our world is the giant bear, and somehow we got there, but Rachel doesn't know.
Yeah. It's also the thing where like, okay, well, but why? Like, because she's telling the story. She's like 13 or 14. She's not that. She's like not. It's not that long ago from where we are right now. She's not a baby. It's probably like it's like 10 years since it got really bad, And how did this whole city get destroyed? How did this building that she doesn't remember being there show up? Why are the people who live still in the building like become like a religious cult? Like you would think they would just also be people who would go out and try to survive as well, and the fact that you learn that they came here from another dimension to sort of like, to be in this world, you understand more than, okay, this is why they would be so committed still to this whole mission and this flying bear or whatever, and create these other like these like on the proxies to sort of advance their mission, because of that. The thing disappointed me about the plot, and sort of twist is like the fact that the magician like kind of also worked for the company, and that's why she hated the company, and that's why she was trying to do what she was do. Like that felt a little bit typical to me, and didn't have like layers that I think the rest of the reveals and the mysteries sort of had. So that was my one thing. Her character, and I think that's also part of the idea, right? Is that she seems like this unbeatable like match. Mystical being, and she's not. She's using some tech, and she just wants something, and she's better, and she knows this world, so she's better prepared than Rachel is. So and then
she seems like a magician.
Yeah,
but really, she's just worked for the company longer. Like in reality, that's what it is, and she knows more has to come down, like because she worked for the she knows Wick. She knows the magician might not even be a person.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's everybody literally might not be people. But, sorry, human beings, because we're all people.
Yeah. Because the same, but I do like the way that she kills the magician at the end. And I like the way it's framed because, again, playing up expectations, it isn't this big, huge moment. The way it's almost like a cast-off moment, when she says that how she kills her, right? It's one of the things I highlighted, but
nonchalant.
I heard her no more. I hit the magician with a rock until she was dead, and the animals did nothing to stop me. Perhaps they would have done it themselves if I hadn't, but I did. There was no future for the city with the magician still in it. I may have been at my limits when I decided that, but my mind was clear. And I love the ending of it. Funny how the magician thought she knew me, how careless she was around me because of that. But she didn't know me. She didn't know me at all, no matter how much she knew about me. Which I think is like another thing that the book is specifically about, which is like, yeah, Rachel, you have known Bourne since he was born or whatever, but just because you know the stuff that he has done, it doesn't mean you know about him. And the same thing with Wick. It's the thing about all her relationships, right?
Yeah, exactly.
She knows a lot of details, but she doesn't know really the person underneath in a lot of the instances.
And I think that I actually think this book is more about Rachel's relationships and how we can tie into them and understand how she views the world, more than a lot of other things, right? Because even at the end of the book, despite knowing what Bourne's done and despite all these things that she knows, they take him back in.
Mm.
And she says like, oh, he hasn't grown, like peace and love. He's just in his little pod. But like maybe that's because he knows.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
maybe he is aware and he's like, you know what? I ate more. Like I'm good. I'm satisfied. I'm fed. I don't need. They're gonna be mad at me if I grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't know. We don't know anything.
Yeah.
Just like Rachel doesn't know anything.
I do like Rachel's sort of, she's made like her, you know, her single mom with 2 jobs sort of like life, like little life for herself, which she seems like pretty content with, you know, and she's doing more than just, you know, surviving now. There's actually some like living happening. And I like that ending. Again, that's one of those things, kind of like the magician, what she worked for, where she came from, that sort of is the kind of outlier of this. Feels sort of like typical, you know, this feels like I'm happy to have a happy ending. I'm glad Rachel is not suffering, but this sort of idea that like, you know, we're not just surviving anymore. We're living, you know, that kind of thing is a very typical trope in a lot of books like this. And the book was so different for most of it. That was one of the reasons that it wasn't a 4.5 or 5-star book for me, were those kind of things.
Interesting. I definitely agree. And I wonder how this story we would have had a completely different story were it to have been Wick who found Bourne. Right. So I think it's really interesting that like Rachel gets this like happy ending survivor thing at the end, because I don't think it would have been the same thing were Wick to have found it.
Right.
It's either Wick would have killed Bourne right away and not have experienced this like parental euphoria that Rachel felt, or he would have brought Bourne home to Rachel, potentially having the same thing, but he would have, I think, ended it a lot earlier because he would have been the one to find Bourne. Like Wick was really living like happy wife, happy life in that house. Like he was like, you know, she's happy, I'm mourning her. What else can I do?
Yeah.
I'm just a husband living in my home.
Yeah.
Like,
I got my man cave where I make all my like electronic stuff.
He has the pool.
He has the pool. Which that was one of the things where like I was like, it's not a pool. It's like she calls it a swimming pool, right? And this is one of these inconsistencies that happen across the board, right? Which is like, but it's not a swimming pool, right? It's some sort of like vat of I don't know, biomechanical stuff that's birthing things. And so when they're talking about how
understands it
as a swimming pool, yeah, but no one else thinks of it that way, you know. And there's also the part where these are some of the inconsistencies that happen, which are about, I think, are more about the dimension hopping. Is like when they're going to the building, the way she explains the city never really makes sense. Like there's like some sort of like, I don't know, tide pool or like something around the building, and there's also like a desert around the building. And why is there just like this giant, you know, out of place skyscraper next to a desert? Like it doesn't really like compute necessarily, you know.
Have you seen Dubai?
Right, but the rest of the city doesn't seem. The rest of the city seems like it's like a. And again, she's calling it a city, but is it actually a city?
Yeah, it might not be.
You know what I mean?
When I read this book, like I do not look 7 levels deep like you guys do. I take the book at its surface.
But it's not meant to be taken at its surface, though.
That's the thing is though. If
that's why you.
I have no problem. I have no problem with symbolism, but if you're gonna give me symbolism in a book, give me a fucking better book to wrap it in. Like it's like. Reading this book is like watching Zack Snyder's newest trailer. Just a bunch of shit flying at you for no reason. Like,
but that's not true. It isn't for no reason.
It is.
Yeah.
Have you heard Kelsey and I talk for the last hour?
I get it. But that's when you like. But when you're reading a book, if that for me, if you're reading a book and that's the stuff that you have to glean from the book, like I'm gonna look for God in this book because I'm looking for a religious symbol.
Every book has this.
Yeah,
I know, and I don't know if that's a better
English class in high school and the teacher was like, "Why were the curtains blue?" And you're like, "Because he was sad."
I don't know. I don't read.
It's pathetic fallacy.
I think I will always be the outlier on this podcast because, like, when I read a book, I want to read a book to get involved in the world, not look for hidden symbolism in every single way that the door looks. So, like, yeah, I bet in every single book there's some sort of metaphor for God or religion or person or this, but none of that stuff means anything to me. So for me, when I'm reading this book, I'm like, I just saw a swimming pool.
Yeah, no, but I did too.
No, I saw a swimming pool too. Yeah. I saw a swimming pool too. It's not that it's not.
Like I'm thinking she's in an apartment complex. She's in some sort of apartment complex.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah,
she is. She is. There's like some like.
You're not wrong.
You're not wrong. But what I'm saying is like the way that if you notice in the book, the way that she intakes information and things when she talks to other people, they don't seem to like see things the same way she sees things a lot of the time. You know, they have different ways of talking about things, about referencing things than she does. And borne, but the thing is like the really smart thing that he does is borne knows that she's wrong about the history of this world that they're in, but we think borne is just some like weird robot baby that's learning things.
So doesn't understand.
Just doesn't understand.
We're the ones.
Yeah, we're the ones that don't understand. And I think that's kind of like the way that I mentioned before, like a lot of times I don't like, I've been very 50-50 on first person narratives a lot of the time. Especially in science fiction and books that have worlds that you're supposed to be learning about because
it's for this reason.
It's because like you end up lost a lot of the time, right? And books that are very much about like the plot and the details of the world, I tend to not like those books as much because I feel like you have to be a really, really good writer to pull off a first-person narrative and not make the main character you're doing an insufferable something, you know? Like, and a lot of times it just feels like a trick a lot of times because they want to hide information from you. Here, I think it actually works because of the exact reasons we're talking about. He's playing with your perception of the world and trying to give you almost in a video game type way, you are the one looking into the world. You're seeing through Rachel's eyes. So you're reacting to things. You're much like Rachel. You are bringing our real world, quote unquote, thoughts and feelings about things that are going on to this world.
Yeah. Like if you were to go to Wick in a video game and see him in his little vat pool, like you would be like, oh my God, he's swimming. And until you understand what Wick is doing in that pool, you would think it was a swimming pool because you are in an apartment complex. For sure it's in a mountain, whatever.
Yeah.
But like you are in, like you understand it, like, okay, this is like some sort of hotel that they scavenged and found because it's post-apocalyptic. It's through like the clues, like, oh, Rachel is only like 30.
Yeah.
Now let's say I think they mentioned that like she's like.
I think she's 27 or something when the book starts, I think. Yeah.
So she's 27, and if she was like 14, 15 when her last memories are, in 10 years, there's no way that like we can't even understand how the cities have gotten to this point, how there's a bear in the sky, right?
Yeah.
It's only when you start to realize things that you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's only because of the reveal at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
absolutely.
you have to push through. That's the thing. And when you aren't, like, Justin, you're more of a plot-driven reader. So if the plot isn't pulling you in, these are things that you're going to miss and not care about, right?
Yeah.
I think that's true, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that this is done on purpose. And like Bobby's saying, like, first person is very hard. Like, remember Clara and the Sun? Like, we were like, she's just looking at the world. Like, we can only know as much as the first person character knows. It's only when you read a book that has an omniscient third person perspective that you'll really know everything. But the point of these books is that you're literally the whole time being like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Is this? What is happening? It doesn't make sense until the end when she's like, I read a little note and now I know. And you're like, oh, my life is ruined.
Yeah. And I like the later on that part when I was reading about the Killing the Magician, she talks about, I already knew she was trying to like, blackmail Wick by like, I know your secret, the secret he won't tell you. And she's like, I already knew the secret because I'm no dummy. I'm going to read the fucking note. Like, I'm not, like, I want to know what's going on. The whole book, she's been asking what's going on, and she hasn't been getting the answer, and now she finally has it. And, and Justin, it's totally, like, it's good that we have different, perspectives and takes on...
I like that you give this book 2 stars.
Yeah, it's... because I'm very much the opposite, which is that if this thematic stuff isn't there in a book, I feel like I've been cheated out of my time reading the book, and I feel that way a lot about, all types of media as well. Like, I want my movies to have, some deeper symbolism as well. And it's the same reason why, when I was like reading, go back to our first book, Clara and the Sun, when I was first reading through it, like, I was like, I don't know, I was really focused on trying to figure out what the world was and the plot was, and it wasn't until I sort of gave myself over to the other parts of it, the under the surface parts of it, that I really grew to love that book because of that. And it's the same thing with this one. I was like 2/3 of the way through, and I was like, it's okay. Like, I don't know, and I was feeling very off balance all of the time, and like, I couldn't really get my footing on what was going on because I was really trying to get my footing, right? And it wasn't until I was like, okay, let's just take the book for what it's supposed to be, which is you're supposed to be just experiencing life with this woman for a little while. Like, that's like the base level. I'll just do that. I'm not going to worry about trying to figure out what happened to this world. I'm just going to go along on this adventure. And I mean, it helps, right? That the last 50, 60 pages are very action packed, right? From the moment they leave the balcony cliffs till the moment the thing's over, it's just like,
pedal to the metal.
Yeah, and he doesn't do a thing where he's
like, here is my plot. Like,
yeah. No, we're running away from bears.
Let's go.
There are 2 giant bears fighting each other.
The thing is, like, it's not that I didn't like a lot of the, or like there are parts of the book that I felt were totally fine. It's not like I read this book and I was like, I understood nothing that happened. But on its surface, like, if you asked me, like, hey, did you like Clara and the Sun was the first, the journey to me wasn't worth it. Like, Clara and the Sun, since Bobby brought it up, like, that journey was worth it to me. There's a lot that we don't understand about that world, much the same as this world. I mean, not to the same degree, but in some veins, yeah, that's a confusing world as well. But I enjoyed the journey with Clara. Whereas following Rachel and Borne and Wick and the Magician, like, again, I thought in the beginning, like, okay, Rachel doesn't understand so much, she's a clone. Oh, she came from a different world. None of it matters. It didn't really like in the end, it didn't really matter much to me whether or not she came from a different world or she was a clone. We got to the same point anyway, and it was just like, eh.
This is interesting that you say this, because I think that Clara's world is the most similar to ours, and that's why I think it's easier to conceptualize and place yourself into the book, that you don't have to focus on the smaller details, because Clara's in a world that you already grasp, and social interactions that you already grasp, and morality that you already grasp. Like, we all agree that what that mom did was horrendous. Like, we all right? And then in this book, I think even like you had,
it's actually the flip of they're the flip of each other in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is that even when you had brought up like the torture scene with Rachel, and you said like, oh, I almost perceived it to be like sexual assault, right? And it's because in our, like, that's the worst thing that could happen to a woman in a vulnerable position like that, right? And in the end, it did it happen, did it not happen, we won't know. But that's because our own perception of like, oh my god, this woman is alone, she's being attacked, like, this is the worst thing that could happen.
Well, she says it doesn't happen.
She says it doesn't happen. And again, I think that's also partly her bringing her perception, right? Which is that she comes from a world where that is like a thing that happens, right? And she doesn't, and these are like weird mutant children with like snake eyes or whatever, whatever it is, like, they're they don't probably have anything like sexual about them at all. And but in her mind, it's because these we come to my take is that they're the experiments, right, that would have happened to Rachel if she hadn't somehow been like gotten out of there. Wick hadn't like gotten her out of there, basically. She takes it as like, oh, all these people were born after the the apocalypse, so they don't have any. They're just wild animals. But we know that that's not true, right? That it's not true because there wasn't an apocalypse.
Especially if
Yeah.
you're around the age, like if that's like, let's say like Rachel was 15, okay?
Yeah.
If these kids are like 10,
Yeah.
like they can't possibly have been just made now.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I just think it's like these little clues that it's only also through like talking about all these little details that like you notice and then I notice and then Justin
Yeah.
notices and then we're like, oh my god, like it was
Yeah.
there the whole time. And you can only see these things, I think, if you either have a discussion or you reread it or you just like have the best memory ever and like you
Yeah.
remember every little detail that happened
Yeah.
throughout the whole book.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I think, you know, that the couple scenes, the one time, and I talked about Justin with this when we went out the other night. The one scene where I was disappointed. We took a picture and sent it to you.
Okay, you didn't have to bring it up again. You didn't have to bring it up again.
I was disappointed.
Yeah, you were like, "Am I supposed to be impressed?" And then sent us a picture of your face
Yeah.
in typical Kelsey fashion.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for it.
It's all right. I should have created an album on my phone of the weird pictures Kelsey has sent me of her face over the years.
I have one as Kelsey's photo when she's extremely high.
Yeah, I got one. Yeah, when you were wasted out of your mind, you sent me a picture once, and I was like, "What's the picture?"
Go on.
So the one part I was disappointed with the first person, and I think like it works with the stuff we're talking about where they're playing with your perception, but like some of the action stuff I think was hurt by it because there's that moment where they're running away from the balcony cliffs and Mord like basically like lands near them or whatever, and it creates like an earthquake and she goes flying into the air, and
she stares at him and they make eye contact and then
and she's like, "Oh, me and you."
I was like,
awkward.
Is something happening here?
Yeah. There's a little romance going on between the bear and the
I'm playing
bear
a
and
video
Rachel.
game right now where you can fuck a bear.
It's
so
true. You are.
There is a precedent for it.
I've heard about this.
That scene, like, there's some cool the way he sort of illustrates it. Some of it is cool, like the way he talks about her feelings. But it's one of those scenes where, like, I had a tough time even grasping what was going on until the end of the sort of passage, and so a lot of the power of the imagery he was trying to convey was lost on me because I was trying to figure out what was going on.
We're so different because when I read that part, I was just like, okay, I'm picking up everything you're throwing down right now. I have it visualized in my head. It's like we are just the opposite mirrors of each other.
I would rather have that scene been in third person, you know, where it gets explained in different, and so that's what times where I think it lets them down a little bit. But
Big Bear lands on two people.
Yes, but she doesn't. You don't know it's the bear until like a page and a half into her description of what's going on. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I just figured it was Mord, like instantly, like she's flying through the air. Mord's here. Like that's just the way that I picked it up.
Where were the clues?
Yeah, there were no clues.
Why? What else would it be?
Because there's a lot. Because again, the book talks about a lot of things. Like they're going into this territory, right? There's traps everywhere. They talk about there being mines and traps
that they never really use.
Yeah, they talk about those kids coming up from underneath the ground, you know, to get them. So there was like 6 things it could have been in my mind, and so I did not place it as Mord, you know, right away.
Which is perfectly fine because I can't pick up half the other stuff that you guys picked up.
Yeah, I also thought it was Mord, but it was only because I felt like the proxies were a representation of Mord, and because Mord now is one of us and is like to the ground now, I was like, I feel like Mord is leading these proxies, not understanding why.
Yeah.
I don't think we're meant to understand Mord's reasoning. He's just a complex guy.
It's
a complex character, big 2-story tall bear.
Yeah.
He just has a lot of things going on, you know.
Yeah.
and I don't think we were meant to be. I think it was an action scene. But I do think that this is where like third person perspective, especially omniscient, comes better in plot driven books, and it's only through first person perspectives that you can either have this mysterious like what's going on in the world, or this really introspective character-driven novel, and I think Borne is both. But there
Yeah.
are these moments where maybe a third character perspective, or maybe Borne watching her
Mhm.
from another location, interspersed with these first-person chapters, I think would have made for a more engaging plot. But again, I don't think Jeff Vandermeer was trying to make it.
No, and it would have broken sort of the
Yeah.
once you bring in another perspective, then you open up a whole can of worms about like, okay, but if we're learning everything about Rachel like this, if we're in Bourne's perspective, we got to know immediately everything that Bourne is thinking in that moment, and then you kind of break a lot of the central sort of mysteries of what's going on in the book.
Yeah.
I did think like it. We haven't really talked about the sort of like ecological aspect of it and the ecological parable of it. And it's also sort of criticism, right, of capitalism and government and stuff like that, because there was this one other passage that I highlighted, and it's near the end of the book when she's figured out what is actually going on, and she said they had made us dependent on them, they had experimented on us, they had taken away our ability to govern ourselves, they had sent out to keep order a horrific judge grown ever more unmanageable and psychotic. They had dehumanized Wick. They had in their way created the magician because everything she did and everything she created was in opposition to the company in some way. And in the end, the remnants of the company had walled themselves off from us when they were done with us, when it became too dangerous, leaving only remnants to fend for themselves and negotiate with Mord. And with Mord, an increasingly dangerous and impossible ceasefire, one that would never hold. And I think that thing is like very obviously a very one-to-one with just like the last 30 probably years of like living in the United States and in North America and in the Western world, like this increasing way that these companies make us dependent and then screw us over, the way that things disappear, the way that they destroy the world around us, the way that they take away our power, the power that we do have. Yeah. Or they try to, like, all of these things, the way they dehumanize certain types of people, all of this stuff. I think it's very much all what this book is about. It's like you said, he uses like the worst possible scenario to make his point. But I think that's a lot of what he's trying to show here. That I think just calling them the company and them being in sort of like this, sterile white building, governmental building is evidence of that.
Like Jeff Vandermeer, in all of his books, there is some sort of like questioning whether it's like AI, alien species, environmental random creature that falls from the sky. Like he'll always talk about eco science, eco horror, eco something, the environment and how it's impacted by technology, government, capitalism. There's always going to be this division, and I think at the end of the day, it's that nature versus like technology. Like I think he's always going to talk about that, and capitalism is the greatest enemy of environmentalism. At the end of the day, it's two opposing factions, and I think that you're right by like this capitalism. There's no like one person who is like the face of capitalism, right? Capitalism is just a societal structure that we unfortunately abide to because we need to live, and capitalism in our current scenario is ruining the environment. We've moved to global boiling. It's been global warming since I've been born.
Yeah.
And now it's global boiling, and these are
15 years ago
is when global warming started.
No, when you were born, he's saying. I don't know why.
Oh. Yeah, I guess. I was like, I thought you were going to say 15. I was like, yeah, 15 years ago, I was stoned out of my mind. I wouldn't even have known that they invented global warming. I was 15. I was on a different level. I was Rachel coming to the new world.
Yeah.
But it's just environment. The environment is every day ruined by capitalism, and we know that, right? The companies will never get extra tax. The billionaires will never get extra tax, and because they will never get extra tax, they won't stop what they're doing, and it's just a circle. And I think like there's that obvious added layer that is within this book, but is in all of Jeff Vandermeer's work. Like he's very much an I feel like I'm saying this like I'm so confident. I'm pretty sure he's an environmentalist.
If he's not,
I know.
Let me.
He has a weird fetish. If he's not.
he has another series, right? The Book of Koli. I swear I'm not crazy. I
The
know
Book
he has a
of
third.
Koli?
And
He has a third
while
series.
you guys are looking for the series, the other thing about what the reveal shows you, this dimension hop is more than just like some like, you know, cool sci-fi like twist. It's also showing you that these people fucked up their original world and thought they would come to this world to sort of like, you know, basically start anew or save themselves or save the world, and they immediately destroyed this other
it.
world
Yeah.
immediately because they didn't change. They just doubled down on what they were already doing, and now there was nobody there to tell them to even try to stop them from doing it. So in no time they destroyed this other world.
Yeah.
And took it even farther than they had taken it previously, because
Yeah.
you know, you see like because at the end you'd also these other sort of like we know the only thing we've seen is sort of like the biomechanical animals that are like Mord and his proxies and Borne, right, are the one things but then you see there's all of these other things that are just like this is our fucking home, like and they're fine, like they're good, like they're not going to, they're foxes and little animals, and yeah, they're not going to destroy anything. They want to get rid of the company because the company can use destroy their world. And the idea of the kind of learn like, okay, this is kind of where, right, because you see that stuff again, it's this sort of like, you know, subverting what you thought. You have that moment, right, where she's doing the thing where she's like in like the mud skip place where she's like watching the waves come in, the mud skippers.
She was at recess.
Yeah, she's at recess in their school watching the mud skippers. And you know, her parents are sort of like, and her teacher are kind of talking about biotech being this new thing that's coming in, and they lead you to believe, okay, so the biotech started and then it just went wildly out of control, and it created this world. But the truth is, it was in this other world, and they started bringing it over with them, right? And to try to save something that they could use it to save the world, and it didn't. And so then and in doing so, they destroyed the world in which it came from, or at least the immediate area, because just like Rachel, we have no idea what exists outside of this one city. The rest of the world could be beautiful and perfect, and it doesn't matter. And it's the same thing where she's just like, you know, the river's toxic, right? And Borne's kind of like, are you sure that it's toxic? Because it's toxic to her, right? But it doesn't mean it's toxic to the life that it comes from this planet.
It doesn't mean it's toxic to Wick. It doesn't mean it's toxic to
exactly.
anyone.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't get that though. You're like, again, boy, she's just a little stupid kid. He doesn't understand like what the hell's going on.
Obviously, it's toxic.
Yeah, like she knows. Listen to your mother, please.
The world is over.
Yeah.
Like, hello.
Mm-hmm.
But I found the book. It was Mike R. Carey. It wasn't.
Oh,
okay.
But
Yeah. So I was like, I've never heard that.
You wouldn't fault me for thinking so when you look at. It's not showing for some reason. Entire screen. Here we go. I don't know if that's coming through.
It's not. I don't see anything.
God damn.
There it goes. There it is.
I have to.
Oh yeah, it definitely looks like a Jeff Vandermeer book.
So like I 100% thought it, and for like years I've been like, I'm gonna read this book one day. Or it's like book one of a trilogy. It's Vandermeer.
It definitely it looks almost like the cover of Annihilation is basically that must be what it's trying to evoke, probably.
Yeah, probably copycat.
Yeah.
No dare.
I do have some news for both of you.
Okay.
Is that Borne is actually a series.
I'm aware.
We know.
I feel like this is for the audience.
Oh.
It's a little play.
So sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were talking to us. I'm sorry.
Acting, guys.
I'm sorry. You didn't let us in on your bit beforehand. Okay.
Sorry. And I was curious. My next question is, would you, I guess this is more for Justin because I feel like he would probably read it. Would you read more from this world?
So I looked into Dead Astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a little short story.
Yeah, there's a short story. When I saw the name Dead Astronauts, I was like, that cover is awesome, and that is a great name for a book. I'm excited to start this new series.
Go on.
I've moved on. I've got other books that I've started reading. Normally, I would have just dove right into it. I'm not saying I would never read it. If you guys wanted to revisit this world, I would have no problem revisiting it and talking about it more.
Did you read what Dead Astronauts is about, though?
Yes, but
I feel like this is more for you.
I remember reading it, and just it was immediately after I finished Borne, and I read the synopsis.
Yeah, but you read it in anger. Give it a chance.
I didn't read it in anger. I really thought about this for like the last
I really feel like this is more for you, because this is about the astronauts are mentioned in this book, right?
A
Which
lot.
I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about 3 astronauts. And Justin, you're talking all this smack this whole hour and a half about how there's no plot and we don't understand anything about the world. And now I'm offering you an opportunity to learn about the dead astronauts that we don't know anything about in the book.
They're not actually astronauts.
I know, obviously.
Yeah.
But these people are following the company as it moves through different dimensions. This is the
I'll
plot
read
you
it.
want, Justin.
Listen to me. I love a fucking good sci-fi plot. It is what I live on.
I feel like you'll like it more.
I just didn't think this was a very good one. That's all. But I'll read. You want me to read Dead Astronauts?
Yes, I do. Actually, I want you to give Jeff Vandermeer another chance.
I've read all 3 Annihilation books. And
Yeah, but you said you didn't like them.
I know Vandermeer just might not be for me.
But this is his book that was mixed with the most mixed reviews. I feel like this could
Dead
be the one
Astronauts?
for you. Yes.
So the book with mixed reviews is the one for me.
They're like, it's too plot heavy. What happened to all the symbolism? Dustin's like,
This book's great.
Justin's the meme of the guy licking his lips and.
I love plot. I'm just gonna name Justin. I love plot.
They didn't like that it was too loosely linked to overstuffed with too loosely linked concepts and loose connections to the message and themes of the novel. We love themes. You love plot. I feel like if anything, we'll hate this book.
Yeah. I read the description of it and I was like, it was like, that's not really what I want to know about. It's like wanting to know about like the war in Terminator. Like that's not the interesting part to me. It's not like the robots fighting human beings. Like that's not the part that's interesting to me.
Look, I'm not like it's not like I have an 8th grade reading level.
No, I'm not talking about you, Justin.
No,
I'm not talking about you.
I want to state that for anybody listening. I do enjoy a good plot.
I know, and I feel like our next book, the one you picked, you liked it more. No.
Well, you'll have to wait a month to find out.
You're right. It's not going to be a month. I'm going to read it this week. It'll be like.
You got to give me a date because I haven't started reading it, but it'll take me longer than you, but it won't take me that long.
I read that in like a day and a half.
Really?
I was in Cancun laying next to the pool and I was like, fuck it.
No, but still, like that means that it's fast paced.
Yes, it is. No, it is fast paced. Like, the book moves. It moves basically 10 pages in.
Can I share with you? Can I share 2 of my favorite scenes that made me laugh, or not made me laugh, but I think were ridiculous and I think for weird reasons, not for like this is very deep and symbolic reasons. One, when Rachel first comes to Bourne's apartment and he's like, "Look at my cool decorations! These 3 dead bodies hanging from my wall." Don't you love these, Mom? Isn't that what people do? They put up decorations. The whole scene. That was more than him.
Animals.
It's true. It's true. More than some of the killing stuff, that like creeped me out more than a lot of the other stuff. Because Rachel is so obviously like, like, no, dude. Like,
go in the closet.
What are you doing? He's like, don't go in the closet. Don't go in the closet. That's where my stuff is.
That's where my porn is. Stay away.
It's just bones.
He's just growing.
He's just growing. He's just a growing boy. That scene, and then the scene where Rachel goes out and she kind of finds those other scavengers, and she realizes Bourne is there, and she goes back to their camp with them. That's when they offer her like the human being or whatever to like give to the magician. That's like they're gonna buy it with. They have that like fire slug thing that they also don't seem to have any weirdness about, and like it's getting one of those other things, and they're all sitting there around talking, and Rachel's like, just Bourne, show them who you really are. And he's like, okay. And he becomes like this giant, like, I don't know, squid butterfly. And they're all just like, holy shit.
I think I missed it. Because when I was reading, I was like, what is Rachel going to do with this random guy? Like, poor guy. Like, he's just trying to fucking live. You
didn't pick up on that?
No, I didn't. See, some of us make mistakes. Even gods fall down, okay? But no, I really didn't pick up on it. I was like curious about like what she was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she's like born, I was like, I'm such an idiot. Like I should have like picked up on that.
That's how I feel most of the time when I'm on this podcast, is listening to you talk, and I was just like, I should have thought of this. How did I not think of this?
No, that's the purpose. We're all here to talk about the things that we
Yeah.
noticed.
Yeah. That's
Like
all
the
it
way when
is.
Bobby says things that I didn't notice, I'm like, oh my God, genius.
There was one part of the book where I was like, oh shit, I'm like fully invested right now. It's right at the end. It was near the end. When she turned and talked to us.
300-page mark.
Oh, when she talked to us?
When she
Yeah.
turned to talk to us, I was like, what the fuck is happening now?
Yeah.
Like, I was fully invested, and then it never happens again. And I was like, wait,
But
you can't do that. You can't, for 4 sentences, talk to the reader and then never do it again.
technically she is talking to us the whole time though, because like each part is divided into like
But
something
not
that
like
she's
that.
telling us, you know. She's like, what they took from Mord and what they took from us, how I did this
Yeah.
like,
I think the idea is
we
it's supposed to be like a
met.
diary or so, like
Yeah.
it's like her record. She's keeping a history of what happened in this time, and we're reading it. I do like because she asks you like she asks you the same thing, right? That has been going through Borne's head this whole time, which is like, how would you judge me based on what I did? Like, because I'm only doing what I think is the right thing to do, but you're looking at it from a different perspective in narratively in the future when hopefully things are better. Like, you please don't judge me too harshly. This is the, you know, this is what we had to do to make it.
Like she said something like the reader's at a safe distance, or like they're not in any danger. I felt like she said he said something like that, or Vandermeer wrote it that way, where it's just like, oh, you weren't in danger when you read this, or
Yeah, exactly. Like, because she's in, because I think that's what she's saying. She's saying like,
thinking you're reading this from the future.
yeah, like it's easy. Like, don't try to imagine that you're in this situation and not sitting in a nice room reading a book right
was
now. Yeah,
Called out.
yeah.
how
I
dare
am
you?
under my air conditioning.
I have to get up for work tomorrow. You don't know what it's like.
You don't know my pain.
Yeah. And after that scene, another quote that I grabbed was after that scene where they're at the camp, you know, they're like leaving and Bourne's kind of walking with her. He says, I won't do anything to those people you saw tonight. Bourne had told me. And I just love this line, but I knew Bourne's memory palace was vast and deep and full of skulls. It's just such a good line.
Yeah. No, Vandermeer's solid. Like some of his lines are like, obviously, like I love like highlighting in the books, and it's like some stuff I highlight for me because I'm like in the moment, like, whoa, oh my God, that's wild. And then sometimes it's like really beautiful quotes, and like a lot of them in here were about like they're poetic about like being human, but I think there are quotes like that where it's just like just beautiful writing.
It's just good writing.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so evocative, you know, because it's not, it just, you understand what he's saying, even though he's put a bunch of words together that on their own don't have any meaning, you know, put next to each other. Another line I really liked was near the beginning when she's talking about sort of like avoiding fighting with Wick about things. And she said, it says, like most men, Wick could not help terror about one thing erupting as anger about something else. So I said nothing, which I think is just like a great little insight line into the way a dude's brains works.
Yeah. No, everything was really fascinating. Do we have any last minute thoughts that we didn't talk about? I feel like there's a lot in here because I feel like we can really get into Jeff Vandermeer using standard fantasy tropes in a science fiction novel that I think are really interesting, but they're so minor because they're in the background. Like I was saying, like the big bad, the warring factions. I really do think that the company is a castle that has a moat.
Yeah.
Um,
It is.
so
Yeah.
I think it's a
true.
fantasy type of world because there's foxes, there's nature, but there's also sand. So there's a lot of that, and I think Jeff Vandermeer is like throwing in like more fantastical things. So I think that adds to the weirdness because this is a science fiction book. Anyways, so I just think like Jeff Vandermeer was doing something there, but it's so minor that all I had to do was say that.
Also, to mention at all the smell thing that they kind of like Bourne's ability to sort of like change the way he smells to sort of evoke responses in whatever person he's interacting with. Thought it was a cool thing, just more about like this sort of like, you know, sort of, you know, and the way he would, I think obviously the way he changes shape and moves around is a not, is not even trying to mask like the sort of like how we change who we are and how we act and how we talk around different and certain people. So I thought that was cool.
Exactly.
As well.
And to add to that, it was only okay when Bourne was doing it when he didn't look like a human, right? But
Yeah.
as soon as he looked like Wick and Rachel, it was like, oh, this is too much now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just interesting how they were trying to put limits on Bourne, and Bourne was just trying to learn. Like,
it's true.
like, and you know what? Bourne was a little divorced child. Okay, I related.
was.
He was like, I just wanted you guys to stop fighting, and I was like, oh my god, me, elder child syndrome, like.
And one of the things about like the kid thing, one of the things I highlighted was like there's this time where I can't remember exactly what moment it was, but she says something about Bourne. The thing is that Bourne was gripped by the false power of remorse, which makes you think that by the strength of your convictions, your emotions, you can make everything right even when you can't. Remorse and a false vision made Bourne say these crazy things, I thought. Which is again the more that he's a person, right? Even though you think he's not a human being, he's a person. Like this is we've all gone through this, we all felt this way, especially I as kids when you're younger, like you fuck up and you think if I'm just really sorry about this, like it's okay, like I can fix it because as a kid you're used to that being the case, and it's like this transfer into adulthood, which I think is interesting. And then like, she has guilt that she doesn't say exactly the right thing when her monster baby goes off to fight the big bear monster. Like all of that stuff is just really good. I mean, we could talk for hours about all the little things, but and that scene where they were going through the crack in the wall was harrowing. It was like it was.
I couldn't picture it. I had a hard time visualizing what was happening there.
The one scene that had plot. What do you watch?
No, but like usually like I can visualize exactly like what they're going through, but I had a hard time making out the shape of the building, the moat, like where they were fitting in, how the bear was like reaching into the crack. Because it seemed like they kept going in deeper and deeper and the bear kept reaching them. I'm like, how big is this bear?
They're pretty big, but I mean, once they get like in a little bit,
then you're just going into the darkness.
Yeah, the point is they can't move very fast. I think that's the point. Is like they're trying to get away.
Thinking of it like literally a crack.
Tiny,
yeah.
Real tiny.
Have you ever seen like The Descent? That horror movie, The Descent. There's this scene. It's this really scary movie. Really, it's one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
It's horrible.
I know what movie you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the best thing about it is that the first half of the movie doesn't have the like monster like whatever part of it, but it's terrifying because there are these 5 women who gets lost in this really complicated cave system, and they need they're trying to get out, and there's just one scene where they're trying to get through a crack like that, and it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And they get like stuck, and I could picture it exactly when I was reading this book. Is that idea of them, and that idea of it like there's no turning back. Like we're far enough where we're not going to make it out of here. Like we just won't make it out. It doesn't matter. Like what's waiting for us on the other side. We're this far, and we just better hope that that we get there. And it was a very real chance in my mind reading that book that they could have died in that place. The way the book was sort of going and laying everything out. Yeah. So.
I mean, I knew they were living because there was like 50 pages left.
Well, yeah, Kelsey. You can't tell that as much when you're reading it on a Kindle, though. You don't have that like physical feeling,
I was like, they're fine.
Yeah.
At least Rachel's fine. I was like, Wick.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like Wick could have died for sure in there. He didn't have his, I don't know, weird like conch shell medicine that kept him alive or whatever it was.
The reason I was able to picture it is because I had in elementary school a fascination with spelunking. And I loved caves. I loved bats. I loved everything about them. The stalagmites, the stalactites. I still remember it all. And I wanted to spelunk so badly. And I would look it up. And then one day I had the misfortune of learning that there are little cracks and you could go so deep that you get stuck, and if you're higher or lower, your pressure in your body can expand or decrease your body, and you can either crush yourself to death for just being an exploring little girl. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to spelunk anymore.
Yeah, that's one of my greatest fears. So that
I visited a friend in Tennessee when I was in my early 20s, and he's like, "We're gonna go into this cave," and I'd never been in the cave before, and there was a rope that would lead you deeper into the cave, and there was one part where we had to I kid you not, I was on my belly, and it was like,
how could you not picture this scene? You lived it.
And the thing is, you had to go down and then out, which is fine, except when you had to come back, because you're on your belly, the roof is pressing, like the roof can touch your back, and you have to go up.
I'm gonna have a panic attack just listening to you tell this story.
And honestly, I did not discover I was like pretty claustrophobic, or at least partially claustrophobic, until that moment.
What a time to discover it.
I had to stop and be like, you can do this. You got down here. You can get back up. You will fit.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while, and I was like, I will never go into a cave ever again, and I never have.
First of all, I can't believe you lived my dream, but also my nightmare.
Yeah, both at the same time. One final small thought, which is that when they revealed her name, it was Rachel, and every time I read it, in my brain, for some reason, something was broken.
Jennifer Aniston.
No. In the Christopher Nolan film Batman Begins, the love interest name is Rachel, and there's this scene in the trailer, which the trailer I've watched a million times. It's in the movie too, but it's in the trailer. Where they're like driving, and he goes like Rachel or whatever, and every time I read her name, and my brain went Rachel every single time.
He's trying to save her from getting taken from the Scarecrow's gas.
I know what it is, but every time I read her name, that's what I heard in my brain. Every time Wick said it, that's how I heard it.
Batman can't turn his head, so he turns his whole body on.
Yeah, exactly. That's my final thought about Borne.
Wow. Well, I have a little sister named Rachel, so I was not on this level.
Okay.
I also have a little sister named Rachel.
Oh, I didn't know that about us. That's so cute. Anything else? Going once, going twice, or I'm going to introduce next month's book.
Please.
Let's do it.
Perfect. Say goodbye to Borne. I'm down to read another Jeff Vandermeer again, if you guys are, because I literally love him.
I think Justin is not. I am gonna read.
I'll go down the path.
I am gonna read Annihilation on my own though now, because I read this.
Yeah, Annihilation, in my opinion, is better, but it's also shorter, and I think you really see Jeff Vandermeer's like craft, because he has to get so much done in like a couple, like obviously less pages, and not even by that much, because Annihilation is like, what did you say, Justin?
I said I liked Annihilation.
Okay,
better.
good.
I have not read the book yet, and because I haven't read the book yet, I've been waiting to watch the movie, even though I know they're very different. Because I haven't read the book yet, so I want to read the book so I can watch the movie, because the movie is directed by one of my favorite directors. So I haven't watched it.
Was it directed by again?
Alex Garland, who directed Ex Machina, and he wrote Sunshine and 28 Days Later.
Yes.
One of my
all
favorites.
Movies I've seen.
Look at that, Kelsey. That is incredible.
For me. 28 Days Later, like who would have thought?
No,
but I have seen that.
It's a horror movie, and you were like 12 when it came out. So
I'm trying to confirm, because
there's Cillian Murphy in it. Cillian Murphy's in it.
Yeah, I know. I also say Cillian Murphy. Don't feel judged. It's fine. I know I watched this movie. And when did it come out? 2002. Okay, no, it wasn't this. Sorry, I didn't watch this movie.
Okay, never mind then.
28 months later.
No, weeks. It's weeks later. It's 28. It's 28 weeks later. Yeah.
Okay, wait, guys. Oh, wait, 2007. Okay, I was 14. We're getting there.
Oh my god.
It's not a bad sequel. It's not nearly as good as the original.
No, I didn't see this either. Josh, what's his name? Isn't it? Okay, wait. It's
in
Alaska.
My god, you watched 30 Days of Night.
30 Days of Night.
30 Days of Night.
You're thinking of 40 Days and 40 Nights, which is also another Josh Hartnett movie where he won't have sex for 40 days.
Josh Hartnett.
You combine those.
30 Days of Night.
30 Days of Night is pretty good.
That's actually not bad. So.
No, it's not bad. It's a good movie. It's a good horror movie.
Yeah, I did watch this movie. And I was, what year is this? 2007 also. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was 14 and I was
Hartnett's wheelhouse.
Yeah, I was obsessed.
That was the end of his wheelhouse, because I feel like he wasn't in movies very often.
But I was in Oppenheimer. So.
He wasn't. He was great in Oppenheimer. So
wait,
we're
Hartnett was in Oppenheimer?
here for him.
Yeah, he was like the Oppenheimer. He was like the theory guy, and they had and the guy who ran like the shop or whatever, the guy with the glasses.
Yeah,
that was Josh Hartnett.
Fucking what?
He looks exactly like Josh Hartnett.
No,
I
no,
don't.
no.
I can't. I only picture Josh Hartnett as a heartthrob, not as an old.
He
man.
still looks like a heartthrob. He looks like he should be freaking.
I'm sorry. Are you kidding me, Justin?
What?
So many controversial takes in this live show today.
What? That he's not. That Josh Hartnett is a.
No, he is. Are you kidding me? Look how hot he is.
I
Yeah, there he is in Oppenheimer, right there, Justin.
really would never have
Now you
noticed
guys know
that
I
was-
have a.
Yeah, I have an ad blocker installed too. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
I
That looks just like Josh Hartnett.
haven't seen Josh Hartnett in a
Look at
long
him.
time.
He's so hot.
He aged well too. He's a good-looking gentleman.
Oh my god.
He's also in this current season of Black Mirror as well. This episode of
Good
that.
for him.
Look at now we're just
Lucky
gonna
Number
look
11's a good movie.
I'd
It's
watch that too.
It's pretty okay.
Oh,
He was never a particularly good actor until he's very good in the more recent stuff. But he was one of those guys who was like too good looking. So he just it was like he needed to like get a little older so he could be a little bit more like relatable. Seasoned. We're like, oh, this is a good looking gentleman, not like a good looking like.
I'm very
Yeah.
familiar with this, Bobby, as are you. This was basically our past. Too good looking in the past. We needed to get
Yeah,
more
definitely.
seasons
And definitely.
so we could be
I
more
think
relatable.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
That's definitely what it was. Anyway, what's the next book, Kelsey?
Please.
The next book is The Mountain and the Sea by Ray Naylor. And this takes place off of the remote Condau archipelago. Oh my gosh.
Archipelago?
I can't read, apparently. And there's this tech corporation that sealed it off. And there's a species of octopuses that have been discovered that they may have developed their own language and culture,
Oh, okay.
which I think they have in real life and in this book. The marine biologist, Dr. Ha Nguyen, who has spent her life researching cephalopod intelligence, will do anything for a chance to study them. She travels to the islands to join the Dianima's team, a battle-scarred security agent and the world's first and possibly last android.
We got themes. We have unknowing themes in all of the books that we
We're
read.
Are octopus is human? We will find out.
That's a theme even I picked up on.
Really, truly, the only book
is people.
the only books that didn't have some sort of like android or question about reality or what would mean to be human was Good Omens. That was funny enough. That was the only one that didn't have that in it.
Oh my god, I forgot.
I loved Good Omens too,
that
but
we read that.
yeah,
I was
Now-
like, yeah, one book we didn't talk about, which was The Glass Hotel.
yeah, which
And
was
the
the best,
other one
which was the best book we read
Best
of
book
all the
we've read.
books that we've read for this. But
That
that
was-
was my fault. That was my fault.
It's okay.
Mm.
No harm, no foul. Now we'll be reading about octopus rights.
hmm
I'd love to eat octopus, so I'm very
It's delicious.
interested to see how I feel about this.
Mhm.
One of my friends doesn't eat octopus because she's like, they're the smartest animals, and I was like, that's a little rude to the other animals. I feel like if you're not gonna eat one,
Don't call them stupid.
they're not stupid, but they're like, I'm saying my friend is a hypocrite. That's what I'm saying. If you're not gonna eat one animal, just don't eat any of them. But anyways, that's my take on veganism. But But this is
all
our
over
ne-
the place.
I know I'm coming in hot. It's because I'm also sweating in here under the ring light. I don't know if you guys can tell my face is red, but I think I'll be able. I think we could do this live show, September 7th.
September 7th.
Yeah.
Oh, that's 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I've already
Okay.
read this book, so
Yeah, that's fine with me. That's fine. September 7th is fine.
and then we read for September because I feel like we should. This is old news. Our September book is Bobby.
Yeah, we're Pet Cemetery.
by
Stephen King's Pet
King.
King. Because we'll talk about it in October.
I
So
think
Yeah,
we should
we'll
just
talk.
start doing the book for October would be Pet Cemetery. The book for September.
No, because we talk about Pet
The book we're
Sematary
gonna-
in November.
no, we're gonna talk about what?
What?
That's what I'm
No.
saying. It wouldn't be October.
Yes,
That's what I'm
Justin is saying the live show will be in October for Pet Cemetery.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that's what he's
That's
saying.
the way we
Oh,
should just
sorry.
announce
I
it.
was
The live show
not-
for Pet Cemetery will be in October. It's not
Yeah.
the book for
You're
September.
right. You're actually right. You're right.
It happens once in a while.
Because
So
you
the
really
live-
should be. People should actually know when the thing is going to be on, so they can hope to watch it and not
My goal is
not to
that
figure out
they
a
watch
puzzle
it.
to try to figure out.
They watch it whenever. It's just my own mishandling of my vacation and a couple of the books that put me in a reading slump. It was a vampire romance. I really thought she was going to be there for me, and it wasn't.
Sorry.
I know.
Angela
thank
read
you.
Addie LaRue while we were away.
And
She fucking loved it.
exactly, it's a 5 stars, and V.E. Schwab is the best.
So now she's interested in reading more of those books.
Yeah, tell her I'm rereading A
I
Darker
told her.
Shade of
I
Magic.
told her that you
Yeah.
were reading that.
It's the 3rd time I read it.
That's a lot.
Sometimes I reread books to get new information, Justin.
That's totally fine. You do whatever makes you happy. I have a hard enough time reading new books.
Yeah.
But everybody reads at their own pace. Obviously, I'm a psycho,
You are.
and I read a crazy amount of books, and it's not for everyone. But as long as you're reading, I feel like that's what matters.
That's all that
Agreed.
matters.
Agreed.
Thank you, guys. All right. Well, I will end this broadcast because I am sweating so much, and I feel like I ended this last time saying the same thing. So see you in 2 weeks for The Mountain and the Sea. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Wow, so beautiful. Thank you, everyone who watches this now or in the future. Bye. Oh, this takes so long to close sometimes.